Welcome, everybody. Thanks for taking time out of your day. I'm Scott Harris, and I work at Chief Architect in sales and marketing. I'm also a certified kitchen and bath designer. And in today's presentation, I'm going to go through the process of talking about kitchen remodeling. We're going to start out by discussing the as-built client request. I'm going to show you the process of how you might go in and lay out your cabinet layout. We'll talk about dimensions for both the floor plan and the wall elevation. And then I want to show you a process that I use to create design options for the client, a specific tool called the Style Palette. As I go through the presentation here, we have another Chief Architect staff member, Adrian Stevenson, on the meeting. And if you've got questions as I'm going through it, just chat in. You should see that in your Zoom control panel. Just go ahead and chat those in. We'll answer them. When I finish up the presentation, I'm going to hand it over to Adam Gibson. He's going to show you some life examples of the projects he uses. And then we're going to open it up to allow you to voice in your questions. We can unmute your microphone and go from there. As Rob said, the presentation will be recorded and you can check that out after the presentation at your convenience. So let's go ahead, and I'm going to start off by talking about the as-built and the remodel project. And this is an image of the space that we're going to be looking at. And one of the things that I like to do is superimpose the remodel project, which is represented here in the wireframe style view. And you can see how the room is going to expand out. We're going to push up the ceiling. We're going to open up the stairwell. And this is really what the space will look like when we're finished. So as we go in here, let's pop over, and I'm going to open up Chief Architect software. And this is the plan that I have open. That's the remodel project. And the main criteria here that the client wants to see is a much larger kitchen for entertaining. They want a large kitchen island. They want an alcove for a new pantry, fireplace, and a stairwell that's open. And if we look at this in a 3D view, you can see the space right in here, and we want to punch out and create the larger living space out in here. We're going to take this stairwell, we're going to open it up so that it looks much larger. And one of the things that I do is I'll superimpose what the remodel is going to look like, represented in orange here. We can overlay that both in a 2D view, so you can see how this shows you the new walls that will be added. And I can also do this in a 3D view. So if I kind of back out here and toggle on the view, you can see as we rotate around, this is the previous wall that's in there now. There's the stairwell. I can toggle that on and off by using just a simple key to superimpose that rebuilt previous as-built project over the top of it. So as I get started here, let's go in and take a clean view. And I've already started, since we have limited time, I've already started on the kitchen remodel where I've gone in, I've removed the wall that's come across here. I've also removed the walls that bounded in the stairwell. And I've also created the sidewall for the kitchen. And I'm going to show you how in our program it works when you want to lay out the kitchen. And I'm going to design the kitchen just against this back wall using those cabinets. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to place a base cabinet. Let's zoom in and take a look at how you might configure this space using the program. So when I click on this cabinet and I want to resize it, I can kind of bump this out in increments. And if I want to make changes to the face item of this guy, it's a pretty easy process. I can double click on the cabinet. I can come over to the face item that I want to remove, as well as changing the dimensions. And in this case, I'm just going to click on the drawer and I'm going to remove it. Now, if you're used to using some software, maybe you use other software, The way that cabinets work in Chief Architect is we consider the box as a box, and to customize it, you can come over into our catalog, and if I scroll down, I'm just going to grab one of the manufacturer cabinet doors, and then I can apply those doors and you can visualize what it's going to look like. So it's easy to spray hardware, countertop materials, door and drawer styles on in 3D, wood species, your colors, and make it very specific to the manufacturer that you're going to be using. I'm just going to press undo, and I'm just going to use a traditional flat slab door style here. And let's place one more cabinet off to the side. Cabinets in our program will bump and merge. So if I slide this over, you'll notice that the countertops bump and merge for you. To create a bank of drawers for this cabinet, just like we remove the drawer off, I can click on the face item I want to change, come down, change that face item maybe to a drawer, and then I'll just split that so that I have a bank of drawers in that space. Now I'm going to slide these two cabinets against this cabinet that is turned on its side that's facing out to a mudroom that you can't see on the other side of the wall. And before I slide these cabinets over, I need to put maybe an extended style on the cabinet or maybe a filler in this space so that you can easily open the doors. So I'm just going to come down, I'm just going to grab a cabinet filler. We'll place it in here. Let's maybe zoom in a little bit. I'm just going to pull that in. You can see you can resize these down to the 1/16 of an inch. You can also easily resize these by coming in and typing in a specific dimension for it as well. So I'll just bump that against the side of the cabinet, and then I'm going to grab the two cabinets over here and slide them over into place. So for the upper cabinets, we have our wall cabinet tool. Place a cabinet over here. Since this one's pretty white and maybe difficult to see on your screen, I'm going to toggle my rendering style to maybe a little more line style so you can see it a little bit easier. On this cabinet, I'm going to take and resize this, and I'm just going to slide this up to be pretty tall, maybe 54 inches. And I want to create a set of glass doors on the top. So I'm just going to open this up by double clicking on the cabinet, click on the face item, and I'm going to split this so that it has two sets of doors, and then we'll change it so that that upper door is 15 inches. For this specific door to have a set of glass doors, we'll come in and I want to make a change to that. Maybe we'll just use a simple frame door that's glass. And if you zoom in, this hardware is pretty large, right? For a set of 15-inch doors. I'm just going to go out and change the handle to be specifically smaller for that set of doors. So we'll come out to the library. I'm going to find a shorter door hardware. You can see the way that looks, and that looks pretty good to set that up. I'm going to make a copy of this cabinet. We'll use our copy tool, and I'm just going to slide a copy of that over, and we'll bump it into place, and then maybe we'll make it a little bit smaller so that we can get our cook range in here. Just like we did for the base cabinet filler, I'm going to come in and place a wall cabinet filler. And we'll resize this also to be 54 inches. And I think we said that other one was 2 inches. And then I'll just slide that over and bump it into place. Now, I'm going to put a cook range in here. Before I do so, you might look and notice that we have an overhang on the cabinet. And before I put that cook range in, I want to take this cabinet and I want to take the countertop, and I'm just going to set that countertop on a per edge basis so that there's no overhang over here and allow us to get that cooktop in pretty easily. So if I come over into our catalog, and let's go in and grab one of our, let's use a wolf range maybe in here. So I'll come down into the catalog. I'm going to grab the shortcut that I have to the wolf range. And then let's also grab a flat hood and place that. We'll zoom out just a little bit so we can see what we're having. Notice that I randomly placed these objects, didn't worry about stacking them. So I'm going to grab the hood and I'm going to use the center tool. I'm just going to center it over the range, and now I can grab both of those elements and just kind of pull them over and snap them into place. Now, when you're using the software, you can kind of take advantage of the computer and use the copy and reflect. Think if you're using a spreadsheet, you can use a multiple fill with a formula. I'm going to grab the 4 cabinets that we have on the side, and I'm just going to copy and reflect those around the cook range so that we can easily flip those around. So it's pretty quick to do that. Notice that I don't have a backsplash on here. There is a specific tool that you can use for a backsplash. Just simply click on the wall, and then you can modify this however you want. And let's talk about how you might dimension the wall elevation. So to do that, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to move back over into the floor plan view, and I'm going to use a specific tool for a wall elevation. So we'll just come down here, and I'm just going to click and drag right through the wall to generate the wall elevation. So in this view, you can do your editing. If you wanted to reshape this backsplash, it's pretty easy to do. Maybe I'll snap that down. You could always reshape this. If I converted that to maybe some interesting shape, you can kind of shape this however you want. So there's lots of different things you can do. When you're editing and you want to dimension things, you'll find a tool for automatic dimensioning. So if we use something that typically the National Kitchen and Bath Association might like, we have a standard dimensioning tool for that. You can easily place your dimensions. You can customize these. So if you want to come in here and do any customizations, maybe I might want to pull that center line up. You can make modifications to it. We have a similar tool. If you go back to the floor plan view, if you want to dimension inside the floor plan, again, click near the adjacent room. And we also have an automatic tool that will generate those dimensions for you for that space, typical to what the Kitchen and Bath Association might recommend for a kitchen plan. One of the things that was requested for this was a kitchen island. You can create kitchen islands by creating the cabinets, configuring them. What I've done for the video here is I just created that island, and then I group selected it and added it to my library. So now I can just come over into my library browser, and I can grab this kitchen island setup, and then I can place it very quickly in the design by clicking on that pre-configured island. And if we dimension this, let's go ahead and just set our dimensions, maybe 45 inches in this direction. And then we'll just kind of slide it over a little bit. And that very quickly allows us to place the kitchen island into the design with those pre-configured island cabinets that I would have already added into my library. So it's a pretty easy process to do that. Now, when you're going through the design process and you want to create options for your client, we have a tool called the Style Palette option. And if you take a look at what I have here on the screen, I provided 5 different options for the client. And if we were to look at how can I apply these style options for the client, let me show you the process that you might use to do this. So in this example, here's what I've done. If I take a 3D view of this, I've created 5 showroom style spaces that have very different looks for the cabinets, for the flooring, for the windows, for the doors, and I've added this to my catalog as a style palette. You could add these as traditional, modern, and create style palettes. You could share them among other designers, and then you can apply them to the rooms. And when I generate those for the rooms, I can then generate the renderings as you kind of look at the different options that I have for the client, and they can use this to better understand what would work best for their space. Well, if we use this process, let me just go back in and let's toggle off those walls. Let's zoom in here and look at how we can apply those style palettes into the space of this room. So I've saved these in my library, and here are the style options that we were just looking at, style 1, 2, and 3. And what I'm going to do here is just click on one of these options and then click inside the room, and what will happen is it will apply all of those attributes, the cabinet, the countertops, the doors, and the windows, using those style options to very quickly change the entire scene. So it's a pretty fast process to be able to generate the options so the clients can see what their favorite look would be, and then me as a designer can isolate it down to a handful of options and help the client choose which one works best for them. And then when I show the completed diagram, I don't always show renderings in my construction layout. This is a 24 by 36. These were kind of the two leading options. Maybe they haven't finally decided before we begin remodeling the space, but these are the two leading options. You can see the floor plan that we sent out to for the set of permit drawings, the cabinet schedule that we've been able to automatically generate, as well as any notes. And then the elevations, this is the elevation that we were just kind of working on here with any notes and details that you want to do. So at this point, I'm going to get ready and hand this over to Adam, and he's going to share with you as a full-time designer what works well for him, how he uses Chief Architect for living in place, and his tips and techniques with you. So Adam, I'm going to click the stop sharing here and go ahead and let you go in and share your screen and go through your presentation.
Okay. I am going to have a completely different approach. And I just want to make sure, can you guys see a fairly ugly dated kitchen up there? Scott, you see that?
I do, and
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I need to close this other screen. Hold on a second. I'm going to first just go through 4 projects that I think really sold the project, sold my ideas to the customers, and these are, and then I'll get into the program and show you a few things. But this was a really interesting house designed by a famous mid-century architectural designer named Avriel Scholl, really well known in the Midwest. And really the rest of the house was beautiful and timely and didn't have to do much, but for some reason the kitchens and baths, maybe she didn't even design them herself, but they really needed to be updated. So I wanted to explain how to modernize but maintain its integrity. And also it was very dark. So I gave them this rendering, added some skylights, kind of modernized the kitchen, did up-to-date appliances, and they had, like Scott explained, quite a few options for the cabinet finishes and the countertops. But this is basically what they settled on. They liked this. They wanted to get rid of the brick, get rid of the arch that was a Tuscan style that didn't really make a lot of sense for the time. And then this is how it ended up. So I would have had, and these people were in their 70s, and they had a hard time envisioning from 2D drawings what it was I was trying to convey. But they ended up with this and were very happy. I don't know that I could have done that without a 3-dimensional drawing. And here's another one, also an older couple, 2 cramped rooms, obviously a hodgepodge of elements. And I showed them floor plans and elevations and they just weren't getting it. So I came up with this rendering. We removed the wall, obviously. And that they really understood and loved. And it's actually still not finished. This is an in-progress photo, but you can see that the rendering really did speak to them. And then a couple more, 50s ranch. We kept it as a galley kitchen, but I showed them a rendering. they loved it. We did expand the house, so we enlarged the whole house for this one. And then that's the final version of it. And I think I have one more. Yeah, I wanted to show this one because this is kind of typical. Like, they didn't want to do a whole kitchen remodel. They just wanted to add a few elements to the kitchen, but the main thing was they wanted to get rid of these walls, which were bearing walls. And so I wanted to put an elliptical soffit there, which would hide the beams. It's pretty hard to describe an elliptical soffit in 3D for people who don't speak our language. And I think the people on this call probably, we speak a different language than our clients do. So that's what we did. And it's not everyone's cup of tea, I will admit, but they ended up liking it. I want to speak a little bit about living in place, which is completely different than aging in place or universal design. I'm not going to preach on it. It's just that I have become a certified living in place professional, and it's going through that training really changed my outlook. So when I do projects now, I have a whole different mindset. So let's go into, well, let me show you one more kitchen. Okay, this is an interesting one. This is a downtown loft for a disabled man who has a disease called cerebellar ataxia. Very interesting fellow. His mind's completely sharp. He refuses to act disabled, although he is disabled. He won't use a wheelchair. He doesn't own a wheelchair. So he travels around his loft in a desk chair. And he wanted a new kitchen that would make it easier for him to cook, but he didn't want it to look like a disabled person's lair. So it was not easy, but we came up with, I'll go right into Chief here. This is actually Chief Architect. This is not a picture, so I'll move this, see if I can move this around a little. You can see that I'm in Chief Architect. So what we did was we came up with these custom towel rails that are actually serve as grab bars. And for him, because he rolls right up to things, we wanted to do a side swing door oven right down here, and a drawer microwave, and inset this induction top so it's flush with the countertop.
Hey, Adam, this is Scott. Yeah. We can't see your screen that you're talking about.
Oh, well then, let's see what I can do about that. Oh, it said it paused. All right. Were you able to see everything before that?
I think so, yeah.
Let me try again here. How about now? Do you see a rendering of a blue kitchen?
That looks good.
Okay. So as I was saying, we've got the side swing door oven, microwave drawer, an inset induction top, and these towel bars act as grab bars. So obviously we had to have custom cabinets because the top rails had to be reinforced to withstand a lot of force, but that's not a problem if you have a good cabinet maker. And going to the floor plan for this, I will toggle on the as-built. I really liked your overlay with the dollhouse. One thing I try to do I'm doing an as-built overlay. Let me darken these lines a little bit. I like to just show the framing layer, so it kind of hides behind any walls that are remaining. I think that's a really nice aspect of Chief Architect. And what I do is, sorry, so let me just turn off this as-built. It's pretty clean there. You get to see the new layout. I tend to show a demo construction plan separate from a cabinet plan and then a soffit plan. I really like things to be separate and clean and even. But anyway, speaking of living in place, let's go up to the second floor. This is a typical closet. I will turn this layer off. Typical closet, you know, 5x5 closet, but I try to, when I'm doing an addition or it's definitely a new build, stack closets. So if there is ever a need for an elevator, they've got a prefabricated elevator shaft. But there's a few little tricks that are very helpful when doing this. So to cut down on the time and the labor that it would take in the future. So if it ever gets done. So typical floor plan here, I hopefully find out which kind of elevator might go in there. Usually you need some solid rails here for the elevator to attach to, for the rails to attach to. So you put those in at just 2x12 fills. And then going down to the next floor, you can see the floor, I'm going to reduce the line weight so it doesn't look so clunky. You actually have to inset the floor. It's almost like balloon framing, even though it's platform framing, but you are insetting this floor system. And I'll give you a little perspective. So this is what it looks like. And this is what's really helpful for, I found that framers, builders in general, when you're doing something that's a little unconventional, they want to see it in 3D. So it's quite helpful for them. And you can make it look like anything. You can actually show the materials if you want to, but the main thing is to depict what it is you want to do. And you can see that in this case, the subfloor actually has to be cut at the bottom plates. Has to terminate under the bottom plates. Another little trick I like here, typical wall with a door, and Chief is really great at adding the framing members. Usually they're pretty good just being inset or being created automatically, and I think that is what I did in this case. But then I went ahead and modified this wall framing. But here's the thing: when you're doing a building that may at some point require a wheelchair or some kind of wider opening, it is quite expensive to go in and tear out a wall in order to do that. But it's so easy to just go ahead and plan for it in advance. So opening up this wall detail, I just overframe. So the header is large enough for a 3.0 door, but a lot of people don't want 3.0 doors going into their bedrooms or their bathrooms. But by overframing this way, it really, as long as there's no electrical in this space right here, it would take, you bring a 3.0 door on site and cut the bottom plate, and you don't even have to repair any drywall. So it's that easy. So just a little thing that I tend to do, especially if I am doing a project for anyone who's at all older. And a couple other little things. This is a bathroom. This is actually for a retired NFL linebacker. And one thing I tend to do is put in grab bars everywhere, every shower, anywhere, actually anywhere that there's a slippery surface, I tend to put in grab bars. I usually substitute grab bars for towel bars. And now it's not the ugly ones that you see in the restroom, the public restroom. They're pretty, really beautiful grab bars. I think these in here are actually made by Brizo or Delta, but there's so many on the market. They do have to be fastened correctly, and it's not the norm where you just put in some framing. I think that if you're using some sort of hollow wall anchors like wingets that are designed to hold 250 pounds a piece, that's better than putting them into solid framing, because you never know what you're going to hit behind the drywall or the Durock or whatever. You don't know if you've checked or cracked the wood. And the last thing I want is to get a call from the ER saying, hey, you know that grab bar? Well, not only did it come out of the wall and the tile has to be repaired, but I have a broken bone. So I try to follow all the rules and make sure they're assembled correctly, fastened correctly. Another thing in this is a horizon line here, which doesn't have to be very ugly. That helps people with vertigo, especially if it's a very enclosed shower. It could be monochromatic, and people may not know which way is up. Injuries happen all the time. Here's the same shower. The only thing I'm going to change here in this rendering is I'm going to take out the curb and show just a curbless shower. That's rendering, so it might take a minute to show up on your screen. So again, I said this guy was a professional athlete. I put some images of him from the NFL up here. He thought that was cute. But if he does have an injury, or if you have a high school kid or anyone who plays sports, they're going to get injured. So why not just go ahead and make it the shower curbless? Why put in the curb if you don't have to? So in this case, I just wanted them to see what it would look like both ways. And that's really those are the small things I wanted to show everyone. I'm going to turn it back over to these other pros, and I'll be available for questions. So I will unshare my screen. And there you have it. Scott, you taking over?
So thanks a lot, Adam. And if you have questions, I think there may have been a few questions if we didn't get a chance to answer, but there was a couple questions that came in. I'll read this one off, Adam. It was to you. When you were showing the various before photos and then the renderings, did you upgrade the kitchens, did you create the renderings from scratch, or were you somehow able to create the renderings by sketching over the top of the photo?
Oh, no, I created them from scratch. So okay. Yeah, I like, actually my method is typically to delete everything in a room and start as if it's a completely fresh palette. That's my preferred method.
From the as-built drawing, you just would go in and remove any architectural elements in there?
Right, I'll remove everything they'll let me remove and pretend that it's a blank canvas. And how would I do this in a perfect world?
Mm-hmm. Okay, great.
We also have Robert Reed was raising his hand to ask a question. He's speaking right now.
Okay, Adam or Robert, I'm going to unmute your microphone here if I can. Maybe you may have to do that as a facilitator, Rob.
I'm trying to unmute him, and it's not working.
I know, Robert. Maybe it's good that you don't. Robert, you may have to unmute yourself if that's an option.
Yeah, I don't know what happened, guys. I didn't have a question. I'm just listening and learning.
Okay, great. Does anybody else have any questions they'd like to ask?
I guess we're incredibly thorough. 56 people and no questions.
Yeah. Here's a question that came in. It may be directed here. Is there a way to measure the distance between the upper cabinet and the countertop below? And maybe I can share my screen here. The answer to that is, yeah, you can do that with the dimension tool. You see if I zoom in here, I've got the dimension from the top of countertop to the bottom of the cabinet. Maybe you might want to add a dimension detail for the light rail, which I've done over here. In that case at 1.5 inches, but that's a pretty easy process when you use that automatic dimension tool. I think that question came in from Caitlin.
Okay, and did we address Ann McKinley was asking about how the software produces construction drawings?
Okay, so question is, Ann, are you out there? Can unmute your mic, Ann?
Let's see. Here we go.
So Ann, if you're out there and want to unmute your mic, maybe you could add a little context what you're looking for your construction drawing.
Yes, often, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, I often have to reconfigure a space, take out a wall, add a wall, and so I need construction drawings, tell the contractor what walls I need to take out and where I need to add things. So I just wonder if there's an easy way to do that with this program.
Sure. Adam, you were using an as-built overlay, right?
Yeah. If I can share a new build that I happen to have up on my screen. Let's just put it up here. So this is a full-on construction document. Is it? I don't know if it's big enough for you guys to see. Let's see. Is this kind of the kind of thing you were asking for, like roof plan, mechanical plans, construction plan, elevations? Is this what you're looking for?
But not. I'm just a kitchen and bath design, so I don't go into all this detail. But yes,
Well,
mechanical plans and construction plans, basic ones.
Well, yeah, it does a great job at that, and that's really how I make my living, with the nuts and bolts of construction drawings. As much as I love pretty things, we have to have a way to describe how they actually get built.
Mm-hmm. I have Home Designer Pro right now, and so you have to kind of just create each wall individually and figure out where they go. So I was hoping that this plan, if I upgrade to this, will be a easier process.
So, Ann, yeah, you're using Home Designer Pro. One of the things you can do with that program is when you have an as-built and you want to mark walls to be removed or demoed, you could always just draw a little CAD diagram over the top of it where that wall is. And, sometimes what I'll do is mark that to have an orange fill. I'm trying to see if I have an example of that I can easily show you. But you can mark that as an orange fill, and then when you're doing your as-built, if I can open this here, yeah, I'll pull that over and share my screen. So if you look kind of in the bottom left-hand section of the menu or the screen here, I've drawn some orange lines in here that would represent the walls that need to be removed. Mm-hmm. And you could do that really pretty easily by just drawing a CAD line over the top of those walls. Then you move this other wall out the 4 feet or whatever it is. And then you could show that and dimension to those as well to indicate where you're going to move those things out. We kind of do that process automatically for you in Chief Architect, where you can superimpose the remodel over the top of the as-built, and then you wouldn't have to go through that extra step. And you can do it in a 3D view or in a 2D view, which is the 3D is off to the side. You can see the added 4 feet of space and then the added closet space that's off to the right. So being able to get that as-built overlay is a bit easier using Chief Architect Premier software.
Yeah, that's what I wanted.
Okay, great. How we doing?
Someone had a question about allow for a future 3-foot wide opening in a glass shower. The answer is no, because I would make it 3 feet in the beginning, if at all possible. And actually, if you can remove the door, if the shower is big enough that it doesn't need a door, you really only need 32 inches of clear space. You don't have to necessarily have to have 36.
All right, we've got another question, guys, from Farad about separating existing walls and new walls. You're allowed to talk, Farad, if you want to expand on what you're asking. Oh, you've got it on mute. Oops.
Well, I think I can answer that anyway. Yeah.
Okay.
Just by putting different walls on different layers, you can choose what you want to see. You can really choose to show or hide anything by selecting different layers to be visible.
So if I do that in the construction management system, the like estimating that you have on the software, can it recognize that this is the old and this is new? This is which one is the existing, which one is new?
Oh, dear.
I'm not certain of the answer to this, but it seems like what you choose to put in the materials list either gets counted or doesn't get counted. I don't use the materials list very often, so Scott, I'm sure, could answer that better.
Yeah, sure. If I understand your question correctly, if you've got a situation where you want to do a remodel project and separate things out. Trying to see if I can quickly get to a picture of this, but I've got a remodel condition that one of the things that we've done here is created a, let's see if I have that here. Yeah. I've created an as-built, and if I can share my screen, show you what I've got here. There we go, share. So I've got a an as-built, and what I did, Rod, was I color-coded the remodel condition so you can see that I framed it in green. And in the program, you could set those walls up, and which is what I did, is I set those walls up as new construction, and then I can draw a rectangle or a shape around the area that I want to run the materials list, and then I can generate the materials list by area and generate that list, if that helps.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
How are we doing on questions out there, Rob?
Let's see. There was someone who I think was responding to one of your earlier descriptions to another attendee. It said, would you also use a demo wall style instead? Let's see. See if I can get that person up here.
Tina Castor.
Okay, so Tina, are you out there? Can maybe add some context to that question? Unmute your microphone.
Okay.
Yes, Scott, when you were showing, when the person was asking about the construction documents and you being able to show new versus old walls, you just use that demo wall style instead, and that way that wall is still shown there. And you could, I guess, turn that off and on depending on how clean you want your documents to be.
You could, sure. If you look at what I've done here, this is the remodel project that's fully completed. And when I turn on the superimpose this wall that was the demo wall, it kind of went all the way through here. What I've done there is I've just reached out and superimposed this as-built plan that we have.
Scott, we can't see, you have a folder up in the way.
Yes.
You have a folder. Okay, let's make sure that we share the right screen.
Yeah, not your bank account info, please. Well, you know, if you want to.
Nice. Screen one, share. Okay. We're good now?
Yep.
Okay. So here's the remodel project, and I can toggle that on and toggle it off. What it's doing here is reaching out to the completed plan. And when you switch over to the completed plan, here's that wall that's in the middle of it.
Okay.
You know, one super easy way, instead of superimposing that, is you could just use a CAD line tool and draw a line that would represent a previous wall. You could fill that and hatch that and just mark it as a, if we went into the fill style and we just did a hatching of some sort, you could just go in and hatch something and just do a call out for that and say that, you know, that's a demo wall. Okay. And you're going to remove it. That's super quick. One of the things that I kind of like to do is I like to be able to superimpose the two things. And really, I kind of like to use this process where you go out, you get your as-built measurement and your as-built plan, and then you save it as a remodel. And then you can always superimpose the two in 2D or 3D. And when we're looking at this design here, it's kind of nice because you could send this out to the client. You could even share it with them. They could view it on a tablet, but you can basically toggle this on by going into the and setting up the as-built plan. We'll just set that to be, and once it reaches out to that file, it will superimpose it over the top. And now you can see, you know, gosh, the stairwell was covered previously. There's a wall here that was the previous exterior wall, and you can easily toggle that on and toggle it off so that it could be visualized and people can see what the space is going to look like.
Okay.
So that's one advantage to being able to do that. But if you're just after a quick and dirty, you could just draw a little CAD box in there and say, hey, here's where the previous wall was. We're going to knock it out and move it 4 feet.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So Scott, it seems like most of the questions that people have are about the technical aspects of getting things done within the software. Can you speak to what's the best way to, because there's certainly a lot of features. What's the best way to get started and to sort of learn about all this, the individual capabilities? Yeah,
so good question. One of the things that that we do is we provide a lot of videos when you use our software, because it's one thing to make a decision to buy software, right? And now you're like, oh my gosh, how do I run this thing? So we provide hundreds of videos, and we specifically kind of have a playlist that's for the brand new person. So you go through, watch those videos, and then we also have a program that we've implemented recently called Boot Camp. And if you just get into the situation where you say, yeah, I want to learn how to do it, we have a boot camp class. It's free, and it's offered weekly, potentially bi-weekly, depending on what the schedule is. You jump into that and we'll kind of show you how to get started, and then the other videos you can use to help yourself along. And we also, you know, if you want one-on-one help, we can screen share with you, kind of like what we're doing today, and get you through a particular project.
Not only that, but the user community is unlike anything I've ever experienced before. You have this global group of users who are online, seems like a lot, who really enjoy helping each other. I have gotten so many questions answered from people all over the world, and I've answered a bunch myself. That is really a sweet element of this, and I've also used a lot of the training videos. I would have to guess it's the easiest learning curve of any CAD software that exists right now.
Yeah. Yeah, as Adam mentions, we have a user forum. It's called Chief Talk, and lately, with everybody working at home, I cannot believe how many people jump online, and it's kind of nice because there's people in your area of the region. If you have specific building codes or building needs, you're in the Northeast and you're trying to figure out how to do a story and a half with a dormer. There's just an amazing amount of people online.
That's great. So I just want to mention that Scott and Adrian have been putting up a bunch of links to some of the resources you have available throughout this session, which of course people wouldn't have access to once we're done. But as I said earlier, at findhomeliving.com/webinars, we will have an archived version of this presentation within about a day or so, and we can go ahead and update any of the links that you guys have provided on that web page, so that people can find their way around more easily. So I don't see any more questions coming in. If you
there's one more. In order to work with a team, i.e. structural, HVAC, electrical, low voltage. Well, there's not a question. It's just in order to work. Are we able to work with these teams? Yes. Well, all the time we have to have these integrated elements. So I wouldn't say that most structural engineers are going to be using Chief Architect. Some may, but it's certainly easier to convert anything into AutoCAD if they want to just see line drawings.
Mm-hmm.
I hope that was the question. I had to guess because there was not really a question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd recently worked with a structural engineer on a new home build, and what we ended up doing is I exported the model. You can export it, send it to him on a tablet. We call it a 3D viewer model, and the engineer was able to basically go around in 3D, just kind of like we were doing in the program, see all the framing components. And one of the important things on the project for me was to remove a stub wall that was in the middle of the design. So we figured out how to put an I-beam in there, and being able to visualize that in 3D was helpful. And then he gave me the DWG drawings that I just included right in my plan set for this set of permits. So it was a pretty easy process to go through that.
Yeah, Robert finished his question. Does everyone need to have the program? In order to trade the plan back and forth, yes, you'd have to all be working in the program. But a lot of times I get things from a landscape architect or an architect that are line drawings, and Chief does a pretty good job of converting them into whatever 3D elements they need to be. So I like the CAD to walls feature, which I think it will transpose walls, windows, and any kind of opening into a 3D Chief plan. So that's pretty cool.
Robert, does that answer your question?
Yeah, I asked the question. Can you hear me? Yes, okay. So the question is, does it run similar to like a Revit program? And I did ask the question, meaning that all parties can kind of interact with it. They all need to have the program to kind of do their own overlays, which I'm assuming you can do with Revit, or is this kind of work independently? And then I guess back to your comment, if I work with a structural engineer, I'm ultimately that I have to draft it myself into this program.
Kind of tough to hear the full question, Robert, but if I understand, you may be familiar with Revit. How does our Chief Architect software compare to Revit? I think you're going to see similarities with the 3D capabilities, but Chief Architect is really kind of specific to residential design. So you're going to find tools specifically for trusses and framing and openings and cabinets and dimensioning that would be typical. As far as needing everybody to use and buy a copy of the software that's using it, we have a trial version, so you could always send a copy of the design to somebody that may not own it, and they could open it up, view it. They can't edit it, but they could view it. And then the other thing is, I mentioned if you're working with a structural engineer, you could send the plans, whether it's elevation views or plan views, and you could send them a 3D copy of it. We have a version that would run on a tablet so they could see that, and you could be able to interact back and forth. If you want to redraw something, I probably wouldn't redraw anything because I don't like to spend extra time. We can import typical AutoCAD DWG files, or you can bring in a PDF file and include those into your drawing details for your set of permits. That way you're not spending any extra time in creating your construction docs.
All right. So does anybody else have any questions? I think we've answered everything that I've seen so far. All right. So I guess we're going to wrap it up then. Again, check out findhomebuilding.com/webinars, and we'll put some links up. Oh, wait, we do have one more question coming in. Question continued from earlier. Can you scan a paper floor plan and import that into Chief, or can you only import already digital drawings?
So I can take that. One easy thing you can do is if you have a image or a photograph of a floor plan, you can bring that in. It's just a picture, and then you can trace over it. We have a way to, if there's a dimension on the floor plan, you have a point-to-point resize, so you can scale the whole drawing, and then you just use the wall tool and trace over it. If it's a drawing from, let's say, an architect and it's an AutoCAD file, Adam mentioned we have a way to import those, be able to generate it in 3D so we can read those in. And so those would be two ways that you could bring in the floor plan. And you know, if you're on the line and wanted to unmute your microphone, maybe add to that so we make sure we got your question answered. But those are two easy ways you could bring in a floor plan and scale it and generate a 3D view out of it.
All right. Do I see another hand raised? I feel like there's another hand raised up there. Who is this? Yvonne. Okay, Yvonne.
Yes, hello. I have a question for Adam. It's a design question, and I was rather intrigued by your grab bars that were in the bathroom and in the kitchen areas. And I wanted you to talk a little bit about the size of those grab bars, the circumferences. Did you follow ADA guidelines, or is it necessary in the home? Could you talk about how you selected these grab bars that were also towel racks, you know, for not to look institutional.
Yeah, yeah. The last thing we want is something to look institutional. Well, there's the kitchen that I showed you that were basically custom fabricated towel bars that for the handicapped gentlemen to hold on to. No, those could be any circumference because they're not typically grab bars. I didn't call them out as grab bars. I called them out as towel bars, but then I made very specific reference to the cabinet maker and the steel fabricator and how I wanted them to be constructed so they would hold them up. But they're not the circumference of a typical grab bar, which I think is 1.25 inches, but I can't remember. But all the ones that I specify for instead of towel bars, they're whatever the normal circumference is. And there's so many beautiful ones. Even Wingets, the company I mentioned earlier that has those hollow wall fasteners that'll hold 200. They even have fasteners that'll hold 400 pounds up in a hollow wall. They also make beautiful grab bars. So I don't know if that answers your question, but.
Well, I guess my thought is if you were talking with a client, and I guess this is homes for living, continued living, you don't feel compelled to make it meet a particular code, such as an accessibility code or an ADA standard. You just make it possible for them to grab onto something if they fall, not necessarily meeting a code.
Well, I do follow the Living in Place Institute guidelines. I had put up that website earlier. That's where I got the training for Living in Place. I think it's livinginplace.institute is the website. And in that training, which is, I think it was 18 hours, 16 or 18 hours of training, there are very specific guidelines they follow. Some mimic the ADA, but I think in most cases they go beyond the ADA guidelines.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else have any questions? I think we're all set. Well, thank you guys.
60 minutes. Wow.
Wow, that's pretty good. Well, I'd want to thank Scott and Adam for their presentation today. And again, we're going to have links to all the resources they mentioned and a video of this entire presentation at finehomebuilding.com/webinars. Thanks everyone for watching. And thank you very much for coming by, Adam and Scott.
Rob,
Pleasure.
yeah, Rob, thanks to you and the Fine Home Building team for setting this up. Appreciate all of the attendees out there for coming by. Hopefully we gave you a few tips. Adam, for your expertise and your design work, we really appreciate your knowledge there.
Anytime, my pleasure.